And President Biden heads to Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, where he's expected to deliver remarks about reducing gun violence in America. This comes as the president ramps up his visits to key battleground states ahead of the November midterms, which, according to a CBS News battleground tracker, Republicans are poised to take control. Senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe is at the White House now with the very latest on the president's moves and the midterms. Ed, good morning. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Anne-Marie. Happy Tuesday. You know, we haven't seen too much of President Biden in recent weeks for a variety of reasons. Remember, he had COVID-19 for most of July. He had his own 2-week summer break. And then, of course, there was the FBI raid at the former President Donald Trump's Florida estate. That's been dominating the headlines. But the current president's trying to make a push to get back into them. He'll be headed to a state today that he believes is key to Democratic victories in November.
President Biden is gearing up for a busy fall travel schedule designed to tout his party's accomplishments.
And to state the obvious, there's a lot at stake.
Mr. Biden's travels begin today with the first of 3 stops he'll make in Pennsylvania in the next week. Democrats believe the Keystone State's open races for Senate and governor, plus several competitive House races, are key to their chances this November. In Wilkes-Barre today, the president is scheduled to speak on crime and gun violence.
I'm determined to ban assault weapons in this country.
Then Thursday, he's set to deliver a primetime address outside Philadelphia's Independence Hall on the continued battle for the soul of the nation. And on Labor Day, the president will visit Pittsburgh. That day, he'll also stop in Wisconsin, and later next week, Ohio. 2 more big Senate and gubernatorial battlegrounds.
What do we want? Abortion rights!
As the fall campaign begins, the future of abortion rights is emerging as a big motivator. Likely voters say their vote for Congress this year will be to support abortion rights rather than oppose them.
Blake Masters has made his dangerous ideas on abortion easy to understand.
Democrats are now filling the airwaves with ads targeting Republicans on the issue.
The Supreme Court, supported by Republicans, just overturned Roe v. Wade, endangering women's health care choice across America.
And that has Republicans like Washington State candidate Tiffany Smiley trying to preempt Democratic attacks.
I'm pro-life, but I oppose a federal abortion ban.
Now, the CBS News Battleground Tracker also finds, of course, that the economy remains the top issue of concern to voters across the country, which is why you're going to hear Republicans focus primarily on issues of dollars and cents, believing that if they focus on that, they have a way of suggesting Democrats haven't been handling the economy well and they deserve to win. Democrats are talking about it as well, pointing out that inflation's easing, the unemployment rate's in good shape, gas prices are coming down. But they're going to keep talking about those issues of social concern, gun control, abortion rights, climate change, and the fate of democracy, believing that will help boost their turnout in November, Anne-Marie.
So really quickly, Ed, what do we expect to hear from the president this afternoon?
There will be a renewal of his pledge to ban assault weapons in this country. He has made the point recently, and he'll make it again today, that he was part of the push to do it in the 1990s, and he wants to do it again, believing there's majority support to do so. You just need more congressional Democrats and like-minded Republicans to make it happen in Congress. He'll also talk about funding the police, separating himself from the far-left flank of his party that pushed to defund the police, making the argument that his legislation passed last year and budgets that he's proposed would add hundreds of thousands of cops in this country, boost law enforcement budgets, but also make the argument that if you're a Republican who talks in recent weeks about defunding the FBI or supporting those that attacked police officers on January 6th at the U.S. Capitol, you're not somebody who supports law enforcement.
So the president sure does love Pennsylvania. He spent an awful lot of time there. I know he was born there, but as you point out, the Keystone State may be key. It's still a toss-up when it comes to at least our battleground tracker. But can you tell us a little bit more about how the midterm races are shaping up there?
Yeah, more than a dozen times he has been to Pennsylvania as president. A Democratic official in that state last night joked that in the next week he's going to campaign more across the state than the actual U.S. Senate candidates on the ballot, and he has a point. Look, close races for governor. You have Democrat Josh Shapiro facing Republican Doug Mastriano. In the Senate race, John Fetterman, the Democrat, of course, suffered a stroke earlier this year, is pulling away from Mehmet Oz, the Republican candidate, former TV doctor. Some polling suggests it's a closer race. Either way, it will be close. They always are in Pennsylvania. But the president's going to places like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Ohio, not only because they have big Senate and governor's races this year, as do places like Arizona and Nevada and Florida and Georgia, but because those states are also 2024 presidential battleground states. He figures you come early and often, you start investing time and money in those states now, it could help him in his reelection fight.
And you know, his approval rating, I think, has inched up a little bit, but still there are some Democrats that are sort of keeping him at arm's length. I know there's some more sort of moderate Democrats that, you know, this whole student loan forgiveness thing is not going over well in their states. Yep. Can you just talk a little bit more about kind of the tightrope that he's walking and other Democrats are walking?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. He gave this big speech. You saw part of it in our story last week in Maryland. And it was a remarkably Democratic blue speech. Talked a lot about, again, banning assault weapons, the concerns about climate change, the fate of democracy, and other issues that poll well with Democrats. You talk to our polling unit and they'll tell you the reason his numbers are starting to creep up again are not because he's won over Republicans and independents, but because Democrats are coming home. They've been very concerned, skeptical, and not happy with how he's performed as president in recent months. But now, with the results that they were able to deliver, they would argue this summer in passing various pieces of legislation, they believe Democrats will see that he's been working for them. He's doing what he can to get things done in a divided Washington. And by focusing on those issues that are of concern to Democrats, you boost the numbers among the base. You boost turnout for those Democratic candidates on the ballot across the country. You probably hold on to the Senate. At least that's what the White House would hope. You probably hold the Republican margins in the House to a smaller number, which makes it harder for Republicans to run that end of the Capitol. Or some Democrats believe, although it's early and there's not much evidence of this yet, that they can somehow hold on to the majority in the House. And perhaps more critically, you win or hold on to various governor's mansions across the country, especially in big states that are going to be presidential battlegrounds in 2024, and where the governor has a large amount of say in how elections are conducted and ultimately recounted, if necessary, after the fact in November.
So Wilkes-Barre is turning out to be a very popular place because the former President Trump is also headed there to deliver a speech, his first public address, I think first rally since all this, you know, FBI investigation stuff has sort of bubbled to the surface. What can we expect to hear from him?
Well, and that's because Pennsylvania is a key state for him as well. He knows that if he'd won it in 2020, he'd still be president. In this case, not only interesting that he will be there and likely will talk about his legal issues, but he'll be campaigning alongside those two Republicans I mentioned, Doug Mastriano, the governor's candidate in Pennsylvania, and Mehmet Oz, the Republican Senate candidate. There's been a question of whether those two guys in a state like Pennsylvania should be standing that close, literally and figuratively, to the former president, given that he can be a bit radioactive and not as popular with independent voters and even with some Republicans in the state. But it appears they plan to be there with him, campaign alongside him. That'll create a visual that Democrats may use to their advantage. Republicans would argue they can use it, too, to turn out their base of support. Remember, these midterm elections ultimately become more about the base, turning out your people, and then trying to convince just that small slice of independent voters to show up and support you as well. Got a few more weeks until November to do that. But clearly this week, as Meghan Trainor would say, is all about the base.
It's all about the base. Ed, thank you very much.
Take care.